heard your cries, we've read the letters, we've read the comments, and the day has finally come. Topiaries. Let's talk about it. In this web series, we're going to cover the history, how-to, training, and trimming of these wonderful little herb trees. So we're going to take you guys on a behind-the-scenes tour at the Oak Spring Library with our head librarian, Tony Willis. He's pulled for us exceptional and special pieces of art and books that Mrs. Mellon collected.
So today, I'd like to just share with you all a little story. It was really the first time that Mrs. Mellon took me to the formal greenhouse. And it was, I think, the end of February of 1983. The greenhouse was in its full glory. It was absolutely beautiful. The scent of the hyacinths. You walked in, it was a plant lover's paradise. And for a young lad, I was really taken back. And then in her very soft tone, she began to talk about these beautiful little herb trees or standards. And so Mrs. Mellon told me that when she was a young woman, she was recovering from an illness. And so she started to experiment with cuttings of herbs. And so she just planted them in soil. And then over time, they grew and developed these unusual shapes. It took about 2 years or 2.5 years for them to reach a size like so. But she said she first started with Santolina, thyme, but the one that she really sort of seemed to be the most enthusiastic about was the myrtle tree. And when she picked it up and she told me to hold it, and she said, what these are now at this stage, they're like living objects. And these objects are so important, not only as a horticulturist, but as someone who was very artistic in how she could use them throughout her homes, at dinner parties, for any occasion. And so she would take these beautiful plants and she would put them in strategic places. And there's a few places here in the library where we can show you where she had to have some type of standard. And with that said, these beautiful live objects also influenced her to sort of have works commissioned, artworks in particular. And so here on this table, we have these beautiful watercolors that she had this French lady do named Sophie Granville. Sophie Granville was introduced to Mrs. Mellon by Monsieur de Givenchy. And this particular one, she was so fond of that she turned it into a Christmas card in 1981, and she had many types of cards printed up and also postcards. But here, we pulled one where she has written with best wishes for a happy Christmas and New Year. A lot of times she would address it and sign it herself. But this was really special to her. And then here, these two wonderful watercolors out of we think myrtles or some type or some other standard. It's written here Myrta, but Mrs. Mellon had these framed, and this was put in an exhibit that we had done at the Firestone Library in Princeton in 1989. And again, she was very proud of it. But what's really important to note is that when this section was finished, in 1982, Mrs. Mellon designed her book plate. And so she went to Sophie Granville and she asked her to do a series of maquettes or samples for her. And so she chose this wonderful little tree and this wooden barrel, which was sort of a surprise to us because she preferred these plants to grow in these clay pots and then allow these wonderful little surprises to come along. And then here is the final version of the printed book plate. And this particular book plate is geared to more folio, larger size volumes. So there are two sizes of these book plates printed, one for the smaller volumes and one for the bigger volumes.
So thank you, Tony, for showing us some of Mrs. Mellon's beautiful objects and also sharing with us a little bit so we can learn how much she loved them and what we need to do in loving them as well. And I just want to say thank you again.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. And I'm sure that the gentleman will have a lot more interesting things to say. But nevertheless, again, he'll give you a different sort of point of view about how he had to take care of them in trench.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So speaking of, let's head over to the greenhouse. We're joined in the formal glass house today with Rob Pecora. And Rob, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your history here at Oak Spring?
I basically grew up here on the Rokeby side. My father was in charge of all the gardens and greenhouses. We moved here in 1956, I believe. He was here for 18 years. When I turned 13, I got a job, 50 cents an hour, worked half a day in the gardens on the Rokeby side. Most of my time, I worked some in the greenhouse, but mostly in the gardens, then doing lawn maintenance.
And your dad's name was?
Charles Pecora. Mrs. Mellon did a search for a qualified person to come in when they were really just establishing the gardens. He had training at the New York Botanical Gardens, had a degree in horticulture from that, had worked on a couple of states in the New York area, and accepted the job here. And I'd moved down here where his input on a lot of these gardens and the plants and stuff. I mean, he did basically what Mrs. Mellon wanted, and there was a lot of trial and error, things. Well, let's try this. She'd go, I like that, or I don't like that, or let's go this way or that way. But he was the one that selected a lot of the material and grew the material that was here. He had 16 or 18 full-time men working under him. I think 3 or 4 of them were here at Oak Springs. The rest were over on the Rokeby side, where we had vegetable gardens and flower gardens with, of course, the orchards, and is also in charge of beekeeping, just general grounds maintenance around. To Europe on 3 different occasions to look at gardens and things. One of those trips, and I don't know which one, he saw these in Europe and said that would be a good thing. And so he saw the concept, came back and started growing them, and Mrs. Mellon really liked them. So it
Grew from there.
It grew from there.
Yeah.
And he started with the myrtles, but also did the rosemary and other plants, making the topiaries.
And from your recollection, how many topiaries were in the greenhouses across the street?
Hundreds.
So more than a few.
More than a few, yes. I mean, there were 1 or 2 of those greenhouse units that were just topiaries, and he, started with small ones. And of course, I have pictures to show you of some of the batches, but there were a lot. Almost a non-stop job. By the time you worked your way around, starting with the first one, we finished the second one, it was time to do the first one again. It's really enjoyable when you start with a small one and develop it. and end up with, something like this. I find that really rewarding.